Sri Lankan relations. Uh, Needless to say that we have the great speakers. Professor Sanjay Bhardwaj ji is here. You can recognize from my right hand side. Ambassador A. Manikam is also here. And Professor George Cook and Dr. Bhawan will join online. This is a hybrid mode meeting, and many of the participants and speakers will join online also. The topic is so relevant today, especially in the situation which is going on. And we say that Sri Lanka is a priority partner for India. I was just listening to the Defense Secretary Girdhar Aram-Made 2 days before. He was talking about how important is Sri Lanka for India, not only in the term of our cultural, social, and other relations from our mythological time, rather, especially during the situation which is going on for last 3 years and during Corona time, mainly concerned is also that of security, terrorism, piracy, and drug and arms trafficking facing the Indian Ocean region. Prime Minister Modi vision for Sagar, which is called security and growth of all the region, as the underlying theme of Indian maritime policy and neighborhood first. We have invited all the scholars, and I don't want to dwell much upon this one. What has happened about after the financial crisis in Sri Lanka, and how India has helped by US dollar 3.8 billion help to Sri Lanka in the policy of neighborhood first, and in the time of Corona. Sri Lanka is very important and priority partner, not only because of its location, rather because of our long relation with Sri Lanka before the BCs, maybe 400 to 500 BCs, when Buddhism went there, and King Vijay from Bengal went with his followers, and then after Mahendra, son of Ashoka, went for his spread of Buddhism. So I don't want to say that my story to Sri Lanka goes a long way. When my first foreign visit was to Sri Lanka in 1994. And that time the fight was going on the extreme, on the top. And I was advised by everybody not to go. But I was elected by UNDP to have a curriculum development for agriculture statistics. I stayed there for more than 1 month. And I had the chance to see the whole country, from Gale to Radhapuram to Kandy. Of course, I was in Colombo, and I found that really it was the most beautiful country I had ever seen. Very developed. Still, I can say that Sri Lanka, having 22 million population, but highest literacy rate among all the developing countries. And you can say that life expectancies are higher than and many other countries in the developing world. So I can see that Sri Lanka is founding member of non-aligned movement. It has good relation with United Nations when he joined 1995, and member of the Common SAARC, World Bank, International Monetary Fund, and Asian Development, and Colombo Plan. We know all that which we are very popular and very common. So I just want to just welcome once again all the speakers, and I have been told by consensus that I should invite Dr. Cook first. That will be nice. Dr. Cook is online, I understand. Dr. Cook? Okay. So he is online, so everybody agreed that we should give him the first speaker position. And George is a diplomatic historian whose main area of research interests include foreign policy, diplomacy, regionalism, and integration. He is senior lecturer in the Department of International Relations at the University of Colombo, and a visiting lecturer at the Nike International Diplomatic Training Institute, Nike Center for International Studies, Colombo School of Business and Management, Defense Services Command and Staff College, and Sri Lanka Air Force Academy. I think he is the most right person to speak on the situation of the crisis, you can say, and what the scenario for last 3 years is going on, not only economic, rather many of things, and how India can support or what role India can play in addressing those issues and problems. So, with few words, I am inviting George Fouquet to take the floor, sir. 10 minutes. Okay,
Thank
most
you.
welcome.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I would like to say a special word of thanks to Professor Sanjay Bhardwaj, who contacted me initially and wanted me to come on board. And thank you very much to ARSP as well for the invitation that I received to be part of this program and to contribute to the discussion that is taking place today, where we're looking at India-Sri Lanka relations. My area is foreign policy, and that is where I would like to look at the focus of my intervention this afternoon, looking at foreign policy perspectives in a very short period of time, looking at it in the last year, but also looking at the year ahead, which remains extremely crucial here. This is where it is a given that Sri Lanka, when formulating foreign policy, India is a constant. There is no question about that. India remains a constant in foreign policy formulation, given the very close geography of the two countries, given the history of the two countries, but very importantly, given the ideology of the two countries. So I would like to briefly look at it from those three angles. Now, when we talk about history first, one thing that we've begun to realize is that we've got to learn from it. We must not repeat it. History is very important. History conveys a lot to us. We are able to learn from the achievements as well as the challenges, and some of the failures that we might have encompassed in the past. And this is where, in the bilateral relationship between India and Sri Lanka, thankfully, we have had more ups than downs, which is a very, very positive development. Going beyond that, in terms of geography, Sri Lanka and India are sharing positions in several international bodies. This is where we are in IORA, we are in BIMSTEC, we are in SCO. And I'm just touching on those three in particular. If we look at IORA, later on this year, Sri Lanka is going to be assuming the chair of IORA for the period 2023-2025. This is where there can be much wider collaboration. We need to see that wider collaboration. Why is this? When we look at the Indian Ocean and we look even further into the east and you look at the Pacific, we talk about an Indo-Pacific strategy. We are told about an Indo-Pacific strategy. Various countries have formulated Indo-Pacific strategies. India and Sri Lanka are two countries that sit right in the middle of this entire unfolding scenario. And given that geographic location, we've got to be mindful of what role we are going to play in the wider Indo-Pacific strategy. The Americans have an Indo-Pacific strategy. There are strategies being formulated in the European Union. Specific countries in Europe have it. The Australians, the Japanese, so many other countries are looking at how to work in this region, how to strategize in this region. And this is where India and Sri Lanka have a large role to play in that particular arena. Going beyond that into BIMSTEC, we know that earlier this year, in March 2023, there was the first meeting of the governing board of the BIMSTEC Energy Center. Now, this is being set up in India. This is going to have a lot of resonance for countries in BIMSTEC. Why? Energy remains one of our most crucial factors. One thing that we saw coming out of Sri Lanka in the course of the last year was the fact that we've got to be energy resilient. You've got to be ready. You've got to be able to deal with the growing demand. In a world of high level development, we're going to need even more opportunities to develop our energy sectors. And there is no doubt, given the role that India is playing in BIMSTEC, given the massive contribution that India is making towards BIMSTEC, we are going to see a very efficient, very well focused and strategized energy center, which is going to be relevant for India and Sri Lanka, but for the wider BIMSTEC region. And this is something where India and Sri Lanka needs to focus on, especially going forward, looking at it from the energy sector. But if we talk about the third aspect there, and that is the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the SCO. India became a full member in 2017. Just this year, in May, last month, India hosted the foreign ministers in Panaji. This is a very important meeting that took place, bringing together the foreign ministers of the SCO. And next month, in July, there is going to be the virtual summit that is going to take place of the SCO leadership. Now, if we look at the Maldives has also come on board or being taken on board as a dialogue partner. Sri Lanka was the first dialogue partner to join the SCO in 2009. Now, this is where there is great opportunity for much wider collaboration, much more strategized involvement, engagement between the two countries in the SCO. And this is where Sri Lanka needs to try to find opportunities of becoming a full member with the support of countries like India, taking on board the other countries as well. And this is where energy is a crucial factor in the SCO as well. This will become a cross-cutting area that is going to be boosting multilateralism from an Indian perspective, and certainly be an area that Sri Lanka has much to gain from. And certainly it would be a huge opportunity in the years ahead. If we look at the whole process of strengthening connectivity, and this is based on ideology, Sri Lanka might be the oldest democracy in this part of the world, but India is the largest democracy in the world. This is where democracy has to be the raison d'etre upon which we are taking our relations forward. This is a very firm foundation that has been laid in our countries, whether we like it or not, in the past. When it was done, there might have been much skepticism about it. For example, if you go back to 1931, when the British were first introducing universal franchise into Ceylon, it was looked at rather skeptically as to what exactly was going on. But today we look back and we realize that it was the right step in the right direction. And thankfully, the country has remained a democracy throughout the last 9 decades and more now, as we count more than 9 decades. It is the same with India. India is the world's largest democracy, shares something very significant with several players on the world stage. This is where India and Sri Lanka, irrespective of what happens in the political arena, irrespective of what has happened in the past, irrespective of other issues that may come up, one thing that we have in common and one thing that we focus on very heavily is the fact that we are both democracies. This is something that we must never forget, and this is something that we must try to strengthen. 2024 is going to be a crucial year, a very decisive year in both of our countries. India is going to see elections, and so is Sri Lanka. Given that, we are going to be strengthening our democratic process, strengthening the work that we have been doing in the field of democracy. It is very important for us to take efforts to support each other in this arena. And this is where India can support Sri Lanka a lot more when it comes to enhancing the process of democratization. And this is something that we look forward to in the year ahead. But overall, when we try to understand the actual friendship between the two countries, 2022 was a year in which India walked the talk when it came to a particular phrase. We have all heard that phrase, a friend in need is a friend indeed. Now, very often it is said, but this is where it was actually put into operation. And that is what we saw in 2022. When India came on board in terms of the financial support, in terms of key support internationally, especially in bodies like the International Monetary Fund, whether it was support that was given to ensure that Sri Lanka did not completely sink due to the economic crisis. These were very decisive steps that were taken by India at that point. Minister Jaishankar visited this country. The efforts that he made, the efforts that Prime Minister Modi made have not been lost. They have not gone in vain. Those are efforts which have not been forgotten either. However, what we need to see in the months ahead in this year, and of course in the years ahead, is a further consolidation of what has already been built. There is a firm foundation. We must keep on building with this foundation in place. This is where, when Professor Bhardwaj reached out to me, I readily agreed at that point, because interactions of this nature, interactions at the cultural level, interactions in the world of tourism, interactions in the world of investment, these are areas which we have to keep pushing at every level. This is where it's not only track one diplomacy, but we need to be looking at all options. All of these options are going to make a huge difference in ensuring that our countries are going to continue to grow stronger and closer and bond even more. You might recall an incident that took place prior to independence. Somewhere in the early 1940s, Prime Minister Nehru is quoted as having said that India and Ceylon have much in common. Ceylon is very similar to the country of India, or one of its states. And this had caused much apprehension at that time. So much so that in 1949, you have Prime Minister Nehru saying that relations are strong enough, we can keep them where they are, because there might have been concern as to what the ideas were behind it. But today in 2023, nearly 8 decades later, we are in a situation where we have to look at a furthering of the relationship, a strengthening of the relationship. You and I can change our neighborhoods if we don't like who our neighbors are. Countries can't. Countries have to work together. Countries must find ways to collaborate and cooperate. That is absolutely essential, and there is nothing that we can undo about it. We need to only strengthen the bonds that we can. The bonds across the Pork Strait remain absolutely crucial and essential. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your very enlightened statement and proposition that energy is crucial and 2040 will be more important to develop further strengthen relation, and more interaction and multi-level diplomacy is very important. We can change our neighbor, but country can't change their neighborhood. Excellent. So thank you very much, and really appreciate your insight, deep insight about the analysis of Indo-Sri Lankan relations. Thank you very much.
Well, I'd like to welcome all our very distinguished participants, panelists. We just heard a very brilliant and very positive presentation, and I think that is the kind of energy that we need in our relationship with Sri Lanka. Indeed, all our neighbors. He made a very, a valid remark that, as Markandeya Rai also said, you can't change the neighbor, countries cannot change their neighbors. So I think that is given, and in that kind of scenario, you have to look at the positives. There are so many things that one can find which are positive within the country, and I think the recent developments have highlighted those positive aspects. India and Sri Lanka have been connected through history and culture. And there is so much that can be done. Before I invite our next speaker, I just like to say that this is really a very short kind of preparatory workshop on India-Sri Lanka relations. We have traditionally Antarashtriya Sahayog Parishad, which is about 6-decade old NGO, has traditionally focused on connecting with diaspora, expanding our outreach to the diaspora. We did so at a time when it was not fashionable to talk about diaspora, and India had very indifferent kind of relationship. But along with the diaspora, we also maintained sporadic contacts uh, at the civil society level in some of our neighboring countries. So in the last 6-7 years, we have deliberately decided about expanding those linkages. And so apart from the diaspora, we've also begun to focus on the neighboring region. The reason is very simple, that for any country, neighborhood is the most important. And I think we fully endorse, therefore, Prime Minister Modi's focus on diaspora as the diaspora first, neighborhood first policy. So what we used to have regular contacts with the like-minded people in neighboring countries. But COVID unfortunately disrupted the entire thing. And for the last, I must admit, for the last 3-4 years, we haven't been able to do very much, or in fact, nothing at all on Sri Lanka. And we thought of doing a conference, a day-long conference in August. So much has happened between India and Sri Lanka. And to follow it up by a return conference in Sri Lanka. So we thought that, before we went into that conference, we must at least develop some understanding of the issues, the current issues. And I think that is the reason that we have organized this brief interaction. I thank Ambassador Manikam, who's going to be our next speaker, very distinguished colleague from the Foreign Service. I've known him for the last more than 40 years, and he has been so well known in the service. In fact, I remember when I was in Israel opening the Indian embassy, we were getting the other side of the version from Syria. Ambassador Manikam at that time was posted in Syria. And I think both of us were keeping the ministry abreast of developments in West Asia. Many years later, I visited him in Sri Lanka. At that time, I was in the IDSA, and I took a very strong delegation from IDSA. We were focusing on Sri Lanka. That was the time that a lot of people were worried about ethnic cleansing. I mean, Tamils were getting killed. Europeans were very worried. Many European ambassadors came and represented to us that India should do something. Their refrain was that everybody is worried, everybody is pointing out India is not doing anything at all. So I think Mr. Manikam is more competent to go into that. The problem that we have in India-Sri Lanka relationship has a very strong historical dimension. And fortunately, we've come to the more positive, trending at the moment. The crisis in Sri Lanka, I think every crisis has a silver lining to it. People in Sri Lanka have suffered a lot, but I think they have also the kind of response that government of India and the people of India have shown that has also not gone unnoticed in Sri Lanka. And so I think from India-Sri Lanka relationship perspective, it is a development. Adversity oftentimes brings to our notice the inherent what you can count on who's your friend and who's not your friend. So I think I'll leave it at that. Request Ambassador Manikam to make his presentation.
Thank you very much, President, Ambassador Virendra Gupta. Okay. Is it okay? Is it okay? Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. Well, history of
India and Sri Lanka is much closer. Uh, there's, there's a lot one can. About it. I would like everyone to watch this. You just film Ponniyin Selvan 1 and 2. That is the documented film which talked about Chola kingdoms, the relationship they had with Sri Lanka, how they came from Lanka, it was to America and exchange. And after the independence, many occasions India had come to the help of Sri Lanka. Even though Sri Lanka at times took not a helpful stand against India. 1971 war, they were not very helpful. But just before that, we had 3 years before that, we had signed the India-Sri Lanka Sastri Darnayaka agreement, and we took back large number of Indians who were living and worked and created today's tea gardens of Sri Lanka. Around 1 million people came. When they started leaving, then they realized it will affect the Sri Lankan tea industry, then it was stopped. Later, in IPK, we sacrificed a lot. It was not possible for the LTT militants to go and attack the Indian. So just without the help of Sri Lanka, it's well documented. But as the moment diplomat, now I am not diplomat, I will spell this out. The second time, we risked help Sri Lanka. Third time was when they war took place and treaty was wiped out completely in 2008. Without the help of India, it's not possible. I don't think in Sri Lanka, initially, Sri Lankans will say that publicly, but we had kept the LTT at bay, and I don't want to touch very deep into it. That's separate subject, controversial subject. We leave it that. After that, the government came. They took the country completely towards China. And when the economy hit them badly in 2022, they come to us that India is a friend in need. So this is the fifth time it has come. So these things in India we don't forget. Being a country with a lot of culture, history, tolerance, we accommodate some of our cultural hosts, other countries. So we treat Sri Lanka still as strategically important, even on occasions when we need it. We did not. One more incident I want to say. When we did the nuclear test, Sri Lanka did not vote along with India, they voted against it. But when the LTT or the Human Rights Commission was passing a resolution on massacre of one of single Tamils in Sri Lanka, we supported Sri Lanka. This is another case that, even though not very helpful, but we went all the way to help. Any case, so let's make another try. So we have a government which is very helpful, supportive, and they understand the dynamics. So at critical time, we have got to help. We have no other option other than help. But the economic crisis is not yet over. It's still having many problems. There is shortage of food. The food and essential commodities are being imported, very high price. There is a huge government establishment. In 2005, the number of government employees, I'm talking about defense personnel included, was only at 7 lakh. Now it's 1.5 million.
So 1/3 of the government expenditure goes into. So that is a major problem. And tourism is long way. It will take many years for it to reach the pre-tsunami level, where Sri Lanka was the most attractive destination. So these are three areas I'm sure India can definitely help. When it comes to food security, they have to allow the situation in the north and east to stabilize. The land which was earlier was used for cultivating vegetables, rice, are now taken over by the different establishment, by the historical archaeological surveys. So many areas of the park has not been touched. This used to be the land where the Tamils used to cultivate. And the third point is that large number of uh, other activities are taking place of, taking citizens from other language speaking in another part. Then the third one is large number of viharas are being built in the north. So if this type of thing goes on, political stability is definitely not going to be there. And across Sri Lanka is the Tamil Nadu. It's a very vibrant media is there, and there's a lot of debate, a lot of discussion takes place. So, if in such a situation, can India openly come and help? And there's a lot of criticism about this policy in Tamil Nadu. That in return for this help, what is the Sri Lanka government is going to offer? So, these are the issues. It has to be addressed, and India is the right partner in trying to make Sri Lanka food self-sufficient country. You have the land, you have the rain, you have the water, but the people are not taking it out. The second is the tourism. My 3 years since 2005 to 2008 was an eye-opener. A large number of Indians to come. Many go to only see candy, and they are not a beach-going type because Indians don't like to spend time in the sun. They go to Kandy and Siddharaya, things like that. But there are other hidden historical Hindu sites like Kakasindeswaram and Bhubaneswaram and Kaligam. These are the three historical Hindu temples built thousands of years back. If these temples are renovated and access is made available, I'm sure at least I can guarantee 2-3 million Hindus will go to this worship because some of these Kodeshwaram temple is historically very well known because this is where Ravana is supposed to have taken his prayer and got the supernatural power. So everybody knows where is this is good. It is in another part of Sri Lanka. The two temples are there. So those we try to renovate those temples, but as usual, religious things came in. There is not enough, but I would like that this to be revived and tourism should be open from Madurai to Tugorin. Good connectivity. You will get a lot of people. Your tourism industry will flourish. Naturally, you will get 3-4 times the tourists than what you are getting. So that is the other area I wanted to share about it. The last one is investment by Indian industries. You make a friendly environment for the Indians. Within 2 years, 3 years, they make your country one of the best ever. Problem is, when any large industrial group, industrial house comes, immediately there is a media, there is anti-India groups which start speaking, writing. The classic case is Apollo Hospital. It was taken over in a very, I would say not proper. It was one of the best hospital. So naturally, nobody in the health sector will go again into that. I feel that you have a very best doctors, but your doctors and nurses are not in Sri Lanka, they are gone abroad. because of this so-called anti-India, because the think tank and writers and all they feel very happy to attack India in media. Take the paper, not a day goes without attacking. It's oh India given so much money, there must be data. We have come with open heart, a friendly country, which will definitely go out of the way, create an environment which is good for Indian industry. Right now, there is a debate going on in Sri Lanka to sell the Sri Lankan telecommunication. It's the government of Sri Lanka company, they wanted to sell. Already lobbying has started. People are saying, don't give it to India because security. Give it to some other country. I mean, if this type of talk coming, you want help at the same time, there is anti-India sentiment, it will not work. Indians are there, they love the country, they go there for tourism, they come back with so happy feeling that was what a country. So if we have to make the relationship stronger, you have to really show your friendship. And I'm sure that your dream of becoming next year home is not very far.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Ambassador Manikam. I think all the right points have been made. The investment about the Hindu religious sites, pilgrimage sites. I don't think there is much awareness in India. Certainly, I'm hearing it the first time. And that is something that can connect the two countries, not just in terms of Buddhist circuit. A lot is known about the Buddhist circuit, but the Hindu circuit would also bring in a lot of tourists. In any case, for a neighboring country of India, India is the biggest market, and a lot of tourists, tourists from Europe and tourists from elsewhere can come to Sri Lanka if the facilities are right. But Indian tourists can contribute to growing economy and generally more extensive economic contacts, and that is something that we generally advocate in our relationship with our neighboring countries. We have to show greater understanding for the sensitivities of the neighboring countries, and some of these things are very natural. Ambassador Manikam talked about the nuclear test and how Sri Lanka was upset about it and voted against us. I think if I were in Sri Lanka situation, I would feel exactly in the same manner. I would not be too happy with India having declared nuclear weapon power status. I'd feel threatened. So therefore, I think some of these things we have to begin to understand. Um, and that is not just in Sri Lanka. You can see that happen in Bangladesh. You can see that happen in Nepal. So I think in terms of sovereign space, in terms of autonomous space, that is something we have to be very careful about providing. We also have to understand that with the neighbors we enjoy an asymmetric relationship, and I think the Prime Minister Modi understands it better than anybody else. Take, for instance, I don't remember exactly how it was with Sri Lanka. With Nepal, of course, everybody knows. Before he undertook a bilateral visit to Nepal, for the previous more than 10 years, no Indian Prime Minister had found time to undertake a bilateral visit, which is, I was appalled to hear that. Because in Africa, presidents and prime ministers visit the neighboring countries every 6 months. And it doesn't have to be a very long drawn visit, half a day visit and you undertake the visit. So, you have to carry forward the relationship. While we can talk a lot about what is the strategic significance of Sri Lanka for India and vice versa, I'm not too worried about it. I think we look at the relationship at the people-to-people level, at the level of civil society organizations. I think one thing is very simple. India cannot do without Sri Lanka. India needs good neighbors. India needs peaceful neighborhood. India wants to have good relationship with the neighborhood, and the neighbors also cannot do without India. These days in G20 presidency of India, we talk about Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam. And I think there are many examples in international relations. International relations, we can't really find an example of compassion, which is the underlying basis for Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam. And why must you treat somebody like a member of the family because you feel a sense of compassion for him? And that extends not just to human beings, but also, all the living creatures. In international relations, it doesn't happen. One country doesn't show compassion to another country. It is, only very, what shall I say, single-minded commitment to pursuing your national interest. And it is in the relationship with the neighborhood that we can see a very good example of how pursuit of national interest is not in conflict with in fact, it fits into the idea of Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam, that if we secure peace and tranquility, goodwill in the neighborhood, it impacts on our own welfare. So I think we have to take the neighborhood very seriously, and anything that India can do by virtue of being a bigger neighbor for bringing in tranquility, for bringing in economic development in the neighborhood, I think it is all very well spent. It is all the effort that we undertake. So with these few words, I'd like to now invite Professor Sanjay Bharadwaj. Professor Bharadwaj, well, you read up.
I think he's part of our family. Sanjay Bharadwaj is with the Center for South Asian Studies, School of International Studies, JNU.
I will introduce her myself.
He is known for his research, and he has guided maybe more than 28 PhD and 35 MPhil. So
now 40.
Now he's 40 now. So I think he's a great scholar. He's well known, and for a long time we were thinking to listen to him. So you are most welcome, sir. I think if I read his bio, it will take more than half an hour. Welcome, sir, and you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Markande Roy, for the nice introduction. I must thanks to Antarrashtriya Sahayog Parishad, particularly Mr. Virendra Gupta for the invitation for such an important, significant event. This discussion that is very timely, in fact, while we are looking India in the context of the neighborhood or neighbors. And I have, after listening my friend Dr. George Cook, that he had given very good beginning to the India-Sri Lanka relations. And after listening Ambassador Manikam, who had served in Sri Lanka and been seen very closely, I should, because Cook is a diplomat, Ambassador Virendra Gupta is diplomat, and Ambassador Manikam is also diplomat. This is an academic view that I'm going to share with you. Academicians have a different perspective of looking and understanding things more in the conceptual, theoretical things. And two very important leads that I have been given by one Ambassador Virendra Gupta about the neighborhood first policy. So my entire thinking or understanding Sri Lanka is in the context of neighborhood first policy. And the second, what Ambassador Manikam has given about the linkages, the connect India has with Sri Lanka. So in my classroom, I start from while I teach about South Asia. Then I say one first word is that the journey of South Asia. The journey of South Asia is a journey from civilizational spread to sovereign entity. We are one civilization. We are one people. If you will trace the Sri Lankans, you will trace somewhere in the mainland India from where. So connect is very deep with all the South Asian countries, including Sri Lanka. The second very important points that I discuss about that this journey, historical journey, is that we had been colonized. So that we have seen the colonization period, and from colonizations, we had seen the process of decolonizations. And while we were decolonizing ourselves, we are moving towards the nation states, building nation states, and all the Western concepts of religion, ethnicity, border, everything was coming and injecting. So how we were welcoming, how we were trapped on all these things and divided into the different states are I would say we are victim of that Western construct that had been created, that along the religious or ethnic or border lines, all the problems were there, but we are now sovereign entities. So decolonization process had been given, because since we have adopted the Western construct of Westphalian states, nation states, we are moving from that. We are moving and trying to develop ourselves from the decolonizations to democratizations. We are trying to institutionalize the institutions of democracy in our in countries. So I do find that these are the three very clear understanding that I have, the connect between India and Sri Lanka. The core factors I lead to define and decide the relations between India and Sri Lanka is, one is of course while you emphasize about the ethnic and religious element, then you distance yourself with Sri Lanka. Sometimes that Sinhalese and then Tamils and then issues comes. Or other states also you can apply while we emphasize the religious and ethnic construct. But while you talk about the culture, then it brings closure, because we are part of common culture. Even Sinhalese, Tamils, and all everywhere, we have the similar culture. The second very important elements that had been further created is that the one is the regional power. I would say that India had been behaved. Ambassador also talked, and Cook also talked. And India had been a responsible regional power, but there are these small states, and that is small states had been interpreted in a way that is fear psychosis in the small states. There are fear, you can say syndrome, small state syndromes dominates the psyche, and that psyche brings the extra regional powers here. The Chinese now, Americans earlier. So these are the two things that I wanted to share. India has very clear-cut policy objectives vis-a-vis Sri Lanka and other South Asian countries. The first policy objective that India focus about the security. And in security, we are concerned about the internal securities. Any developments take place in any neighboring countries, including Sri Lanka or LTT, becomes the violent and kills our former prime ministers and aligned with ISI and all that. That is a concern. And if radicalizations take place in Sri Lanka, then again it's a concern. So the security, internal security, because it has a spillover impact on India, and radicalization takes in Sri Lanka, then also have the problem of refugee and migrations and all that. So this is one point. And then you talk about external security. And while you are trying to balance of power, or you are trying to balance of threat approach strategies and bringing Chinese by different projects and by different policies and developing ports and all that, we have different interpretations, we have concerns. So we are looking the neighbors, particularly the Sri Lanka, first point is, of course, the security issues, that internal as well as external security, and that has been dominating discourse over the years till date. The second point, of course, we are looking, because again, what we are looking Sri Lanka being as and become as a Singapore, and definitely it would add to the Indian development as well. So we are looking Sri Lanka as a developmental partner. The second policy objective India has, that let the Sri Lanka develop and we will also develop together. Let's have that kind of condition. Third very important aspects that India is looking at Sri Lanka is the political stability, because it has direct and indirect implications and explicit or implicit implications for Indian states and on India. And we have seen, I don't want to give the number what kind of implications we have seen, but we have seen because of the federal structure of Indian state, because of the coalition politics, because of the diversity that we have, and because of the linkages with Sri Lanka we have. Political stability is very critical, very crucial aspects between India and Sri Lankan relations. We can't ignore it, and we did not. And recently, we were the first who had reached there in the crisis, political crisis, economic crisis, because we cannot bear it. We cannot bear it because of the being a regional, responsible regional power, and it definitely it impacts and have implications for India. So, keeping this political instability aspects, because that is a determining factors, and the number of references is coming that the one political constituents are for their political benefits or for the regime security is cultivating anti-Indian elements within the country, mobilizing them to come in power, and that kind of politics that happens in all the neighboring countries. So I find that what had been the dominating discourse in Sri Lankan politics and had impact on India-Sri Lanka relations. I very briefly I'll go because 10 minutes, 15 minutes time has been given. Very briefly, I'll say that one discourse has been dominating is that constructing inclusive or exclusive nationalistic discourse in Sri Lanka. Inclusive means that you're including everyone, or you are excluding by introducing Sinhala only language, and you are giving second treatment to the Tamil and other languages. So that kind of discourse had become the prime cause of the discontent within Sri Lanka, and that had determined and started influencing India-Sri Lanka relations from 1950s onward. And we had reached on very critical stage and phase, while the Pakistanis had come more closer to India and Chinese had come more closer to India, to Sri Lanka than India. So this is first discourse had been dominating. Second point is that the construct the basically within Sri Lankan society that a pattern of subordinate and subordinate, that one group is a subordinate and one is the subordinate, and that kind of construct has been developed within the policies, within the education institutes, within the politics everywhere, and then there were pressures to that one section will subordinate or dominate all the others. That had happened in case of Pakistan and Bangladesh also, that Punjabis were dominating on Bengalis politically, and they have developed the subordinate and subordinate relations, and that what happened, the elements of separatist or had come in, and Bangladesh was created. And same we have seen in case of Sri Lanka also, while the Sri Lankan governments, they started developing that kind of policy just of developing subordinate and subordinate relationship. That happened. And that has been converted politically into third, that I would say, that majority minority discourse. And in that majority minority discourse, you are trying to find the solutions. You are trying to find the solutions within democracy in majority minority discourse, and that is also in parliament. How come it is possible while the one dominant majority class is dominating the minorities in all the discourse, in the policies, in the parliament? So you can't have the parliamentary solutions of this problem unless until you do not have adopt an inclusive approach to resolve the problems of the. And this is somehow in the background had been dominating India-Sri Lanka relations and Sri Lanka's relations with the Western countries. Because what kind of majority minority discourse Rajapaksa brothers had adopted in Sri Lanka had spoiled the scenario, or you can say relations with West and with India. And the Sri Lankan government, the Rajapaksa brothers, they have dichotomized between what? The goals and the values. What was the goals? That we are bringing developments, we are bringing Chinese, we are bringing investment, we are developing hub and tota, we are becoming Singapore. We do not bother about the values of minorities, inclusive participation, human rights, and all that. We do not, and the gross violence had been taken place in Sri Lanka. How India will maintain closer relations, good relations with a country that has that kind of tendencies and developed and do not care about the values in the society? and see the music that Sri Lankan has faced themselves in recent past, that the crisis, because Sri Lanka was, Chinese were factoring in the Sri Lankan crisis. Somehow, because the West did not come in support of, because of the cross human right violations and all those taking it. So the third very important points that I'm not going in detail, I'm just touching some of the points. I think we are all learned society, and we understand that deeper things in that. And the fourth point I would say that the issue of proportional sharing of resources had arisen between the CLEs and the mills within Sri Lanka, or I would say that had led to the issue of statehood, demanding for the statehood or provincial autonomy. And that provincial autonomy, India tried to resolve it by 1987 accord, but has not been implemented till date. So what the Sri Lankans, they are expecting that we give one-sided support to the Sri Lanka, whatever they are doing, and they will not come out with the terms and conditions they are supposed to. I'm just touching these things. What India had been doing, I will not go giving the energy and all that, but the four areas that India had been doing in the recent past, I would say that earlier, being again a responsible regional power, being or working under the India's neighborhood first policy paradigms. The 4 points I would say, and then I'll close it. One is, of course, that what we had been adopting a relations based on reciprocity. You secure my, you ensure my security interest, we will ensure your security interest. That like Indira doctrine. We had developed in 80s, and that IPK absent and all that, and reciprocally that you take care of my interest, we will take care. That has been transformed, and somehow we had transformed in the reciprocity to the non-reciprocity. That you take care of my interest, we will do not bother, but we will take care of your interest. Because you are very important, very significant, geostrategically, geoeconomically, and you are very close to us. We have unique relations. That unique relations you do not have with China. That unique relations you do not have with any country in the world that you have with India. So we have developed a posture of non-reciprocal relations with the neighboring country. Then, because of the small state, I said the small states, sometimes there were grievances that we are being a small states, cannot bargain with the regional power. India is a regional power, and that dominate discourse and all that. We had given a space to the neighboring countries, particularly with the Eastern South Asia sub-region, including Sri Lanka, that let's develop a multilateral approach rather than bilateral on resolving, cooperating with each other. And we had included everywhere, like Sri Lanka is part of BIMSTEC, Indian Ocean, and number of other initiatives that we are looking, like BBIN. Maybe tomorrow Sri Lanka will become part of the BBIN and all that. In number of issues, cooperations, we have also adopted a multilateral approach of security and economic developments with these. Instead of bilateral, that had been a traditional policy approach India adopted. Now we are moving towards the third very important critical aspects that I wanted to share, and I think we are discussing about that. Earlier, India had been defining or adopted a unilateral approach on number of issues, being a regional power, and that unilateral approach may be interpreted negatively by the neighboring countries number of times, had been transformed into constructive unilateralism. What is the constructive unilateralism? That we will come to you and we will help in your development. We will help to develop your infrastructures. We will connect you from Colombo to Jaffna. We will develop your 50,000, 60,000 houses in northern province. We will develop your energy sectors. We will develop like 99 oil storage tanks that had been during the Second World War. We will revive that. Only 9 is functional. Now we will make 99 so that you can store about 12,000 12,000 kilo of liter fuel, so that you will not face the problem. We will come to develop your wind energy sector, solar energy sector. We will give you $100 million. Now we will ask Adani to come to your number of programs I can list it, had been adopted by India. कि तुम keep the Chinese away. We are your friend. We are your friend in development. We are helping you all the extents, though we do not have deep pockets as the Chinese and Japanese has, but whatever we have, we are extending what maximum. And we did it, we proved it during this crisis that India had extended 3.9 billion, around 4 billion assistance, grant and aid and all kinds of in this crisis. And I think that we have stabilized Sri Lankans in this crisis of there were food crisis, fuel crisis, medicine crisis, political crisis. And we had asked that we are not intervening your political affairs. We want the Sri Lankan solutions of your problems. So that constructive unilateralism, I'm not giving number, that constructive unilateralism, I think is trying to develop a confidence among the small neighbors, including Sri Lanka. And I think India had proved it much that we are responsible, a regional power. Not going in much again detail. The fourth point I would say that earlier, we used to talk about the resource nationalism kind of things, that my resources, my technology, my education, my health sector. We have shifted from resource nationalism to resource sharing. That you also take advantage of technological developments of ours. We will go for the satellite and we will have a SARC satellite, and that you can also benefit from there. You can also use our hospitals, our doctors, medical services, all that resource sharing formula. And we will also come to you and we will set up your hospitals. Recently, one hospital is announced in northern Jaffna province by India. So that kind of resource sharing formula, that we will share all kinds of technological and medical and other resources that India has, so that you can also equally prosper and stabilize yourself. And the fifth point is that we will have a package deal. Package means package deal in the sense that, okay, whatever is there, if we are helping you in development, at least, I mean that there should be not zero-sum game. There should be win-win situations, that we will put all the things, all the issues in one basket, and we'll try to amicably resolve it, like we have done in case of Bangladesh. Land boundary agreement. Okay, you want this, take it. Water issue. Okay, you want this, take it. But don't support Ulfa. Don't support insurgents. Like that kind of, we had also been very constructively engaging Sri Lankans to develop a win-win conditions, so that we can live in peace and harmony, and we can consider that we are basically a regional. We have the basic minimum cooperations on all the issues, and South Asia is not the least integrated region. It is the most integrated region in the world. So with this spirit, I think the two countries should work. Thank you very much for giving this.
Thank you, Professor Bharadwaj. I think very succinctly explained the compulsions of our relationship, the dynamics of our relationship, and how it has gotten transformed in the recent times. I think the elephant in the room is China. Now, India-Sri Lanka relationship, and for that matter, India's relationship with all our neighboring countries, hinges very largely on our understanding of what role can China play. I don't think it can be a realistic assumption on India's part that India can keep China away. And if we attempt to do that, we are going to fail. We might succeed temporarily, because if Sri Lanka has been in need and we give a lot of money for Sri Lanka, firstly, our purse is not unlimited. We have constraint of resources. When you particularly look around, and your continuing big challenge is to eradicate poverty. is to provide basic amenities to a large number of people in India. So I think what we can provide externally is limited. So it cannot be transactional. We give you this project, we give you that project, we give you hundreds of projects, and in return, you keep terrorists away, you keep secessionist elements away. I think the relationship has to be premised, has to be based on a more mature understanding. Professor Bharadwaj talked about non-reciprocity. I think there is a sense of reciprocity. There is reciprocity is not measured in equal terms, that we give you money, Sri Lanka can't give us the money. So I think in that sense, we can accept the goods from our neighboring countries and concessional terms on lesser duty terms, and India's goods would not be subject to the, they will be subject to higher duties in Sri Lanka. All of that is fine. But I think where the reciprocity comes, there we have to draw bottom line. We have to draw, the red lines somewhere. A red line cannot be that we will not allow China to enter. And I think this is our problem, that when Nepalese Prime Minister, I remember at the time when in Nepal was the chairman of SAARC, and Prime Minister of Pakistan visited Kathmandu. Newspapers in India were screaming, their headlines, that yet another unfriendly act by Nepal. That look at what they've done. They've invited the Sri Lanka Pakistani Prime Minister. Now, without anybody showing any understanding that Nepal is the chairman of SAARC, and therefore they have to deal with Pakistan. So it is not an unfriendly, it is a natural thing. Sri Lanka's need for resources is so much that India alone, either at the government level or at the private sector level, cannot meet. So I think we have to understand that Sri Lanka would need resources from outside. So we cannot set our red lines so constricted that entry of America is a red line, entry of China is a red line for us. It cannot be done. Sri Lanka will have to deal with the foreign countries, including with countries like Pakistan. And why not? And I don't think we need to be unnecessarily sensitive about that. We need to be self-assured that we can take care of our own security and whatever. But I think our red line has to be that while we have no difficulty with China doing projects in Sri Lanka, while we have no difficulty America doing, but it should not impinge on our security. So when Sri Lanka leases out in perpetuity almost Hambantota port, and I think that is something that can be interpreted in India as impacting seriously on our security. And that is where we need to be firm with our. So you need to be soft, you need to be understanding, you need to show sensitivity to their aspirations for development. While we are a big partner in your economic progress and in your development, but that is not the expense of keeping other important players out. And that also contributes to their own understanding of their sovereign space, that we cannot be dictating to them that, look, so I think very often, how we deal with we sometimes are very, very sensitive, obsessively sensitive about China. China will get in. China will deal with our neighboring countries. There is nothing that we can do about it. We have one more speaker, isn't it, Markandeji?
Thank you, sir. I think it's a very good debate and discussion and presentation also from the side of academia, and comments also from Mr. Bir Gupta ji. And naturally, our neighboring countries, small countries, also become very smart how to deal with India and China. So we have to see that how we can have a very multilateral approach and constructive unilateralism. Same time, definitely there will be some expectation. You can see that during Corona time, India gave 500,000 of vaccine and sent so many help to Sri Lanka and more than 150 tons of oxygen. This is also, you can say that India is promoting Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam when we needed those vaccines, but we gave to our neighboring country also. That may have some positive impact on the thinking of Sri Lankan people. But nevertheless, we have last but not least speaker. And we have heard the diplomats, we have heard the academia, now we have to heard some management guru. And he is Dr. Bhawan Gufan. He is from Tamil Nadu, a qualified chartered management accountant with nearly 20 years of professional experience, trained in one of the big four global accountancy firms. He spent few years in the travel industry and majority of the professional career with management consulting and banking and finance service industry. Let me invite you and please you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Markandeji. Right, can you hear me now?
Yes. Thank you. Yes. Please
Okay,
go ahead.
thank you. Okay, thank you for inviting me, and I should thank you, Markande, Dr. Markande, and Shyam Parandaji to sort of introducing me to this group and giving me the opportunity to share some of our opinions. So just to clarify, I am temporarily based in Chennai, but I'm of Sri Lankan origin. I was born and brought up in Sri Lanka, Sri Lankan Tamil, and I migrated to the United Kingdom as a student at the height of the civil war in Sri Lanka. So, and I'm now part of a global advocacy organization called Global Tamil Forum, which is based in UK, in headquartered, and but obviously we have our sort of advocacy efforts across most of the Western countries where Tamil diaspora is present. So I would like to share some of our thoughts and perspectives, and it was quite interesting to hear quite a few energizing and new angles of thoughts from the previous speakers. So I would like to address this in relation to a couple of things. Obviously, there was a lot talked about the India and Sri Lanka's historical and cultural context and relationships going back to many centuries and into thousands of years. Then obviously I would also like to talk about the political and ethnic crisis and India's role of that in the last sort of 7-8 decades. And also then quite touch about the Chinese aggression in Sri Lanka as well as in the Indian Ocean region, and obviously touch about the recent political and economic crisis in Sri Lanka and how what our expectation is from a Sri Lankan context, the role that India could play. So not going too much into history, but when the British left the island, in 1948, they left a multilingual, multi-ethnic country in a unitary constitution setup, which is a Westminster style setup in 1948. There's a lot of historical context which many of you are aware of in terms of the animosity between the two communities even before independence. And one of the first things the majority Sinhalese government did was to disenfranchise the Indian origin Tamils, over 1 million of them in 1948 when the country got independence. And then obviously the sort of oppressive continued by Sinhala Only Act, etc. And then that moved into a ethnic crisis and developed into a fully fledged civil war from the early 80s until 2009 when the war sort of ended quite brutally. But India's involvement in Sri Lanka is quite critical, quite needed. And there are several examples that have been quoted in the past, but one or two that was not mentioned, quite important, was India involved when the Indian origin Tamils were suppressed. There was Sri Mao Shastri pacts, which were there with Indian involvement. Then when the JVP uprising was there in the 70s, then Prime Minister Sri Mao Bandaranaike requested Indian help where India intervened and safeguarded the Sri Lankan government and managed to put down that rest. And then obviously when the Tamil militancy was happening in the late 70s, early 80s, obviously Indira Gandhi took that as an opportunity to get involved for the right reasons. And then in eventually 1987, the Indo-Lanka Accord was signed. But like one of the previous speakers mentioned, after 35, 36 years, that accord is still not implemented. And I think, to my knowledge, that is the only internationally binding agreement between two countries in relation to the Sri Lankan political and ethnic crisis. There's no other thing that is out there to put any kind of pressure on Sri Lanka, which is quite important. Many people don't appreciate that fact because that is the only internationally binding agreement that is in place. And that's the only reason that India, quite rightly so, only country that speaks about political solution in Sri Lanka is India, which is quite rightly, and that is part of the India-Lanka Accord. Obviously, the India-Lanka Accord is much broader, talking about defense and security aspects, the maritime border aspects. Offshoot that was the 13th Amendment, which was proposed to resolve the Tamil Sinhalese ethnic crisis by devolving power to a certain extent by creating a provincial council setup, which is not very different to the Indian federal setup where states and the central government, but here it was called provincials, and it was proposed as a 9-province system, but also recognize the north and east of the country as a traditional homeland for Tamil-speaking people, which majority of them are Hindus. Then obviously the war ended in 2009. Rajapaksa government, the Rajapaksa brothers, quite in a sort of very flamboyant manner, went all the way to China, neglecting the neighborhood, neglecting the West, and then deep corruption kind of helped China to abuse that relationship and get too close to Sri Lanka. They managed to invest quite a lot of white elephant projects. Many of the names were mentioned before here by previous speakers, like the Hambantota Port City project, etc. But none of those were yielding any benefits to the Sri Lankan population or to the country as a whole. So it was all pure white elephant projects, were flamboyant infrastructure projects without any meaningful benefits to the country. Only sort of benefited party was the Rajapaksa family, who managed to sort of apportion a lot of funds for their own selves, and deep-rooted corruption was the reason for that. Then at the height of the debt, where they were unable to service the debt, then they were ending up leasing out Hambantota Port for 1990 years to China. Then when the economic crisis hit, China completely dropped the ball, and it was India that went for the aid with a large amount of aid, which is almost nearly $4 billion. So these are good examples why India should get involved, and India cannot stay away from Sri Lanka, which is obviously 22 or 30 kilometers away from the border, maritime border in the southern tip of Ireland. Obviously, with the large Tamil population in Tamil Nadu, 80 million of Tamil population in Tamil Nadu, when there's political instability and anarchy happening in Sri Lanka, that will definitely impact India and the bilateral relationships and the entire region's dynamics. So it is right that India gets involved, and how do we sort of manage that relationship in a more effective manner to look at mutually beneficial progression, right? So if I fast forward to what we think at India's role could be, and what is important is that I think 13th Amendment and Indo-Lanka Accord implementation of that is quite critical, because almost 36 years after the accord was signed, which is probably the only thing that is available internationally binding, but also which is part of the Sri Lankan constitution, which is not implemented. If that is implemented, that may not be the final solution to the ethnic Tamil crisis, but at least a good start to get the political negotiation process further into the next steps. But that will do to bring some much needed stability in the north and east of in Sri Lanka, as well as in Sri Lanka as a whole, which then will help to keep China away from the island. What's happening because of the instability, China uses their opportunity to get in there. And I think over the last sort of 2 decades, China has managed to use the instability in Sri Lanka and get in Sri Lanka and manage to create and maintain a unstable Sri Lanka, which is obviously a problem for everyone, for India and the rest of the region. So I think that's one quite important thing, that maximum amount of pressure that India can put on Sri Lanka is important to get that process concluded. Then I think the large amount of loans that India provided were quite critical, and it's important to understand that another dynamic of that. Whilst India was assisting with food supplies and fuel supplies to Sri Lanka, there's an element of Sri Lankans who were protesting on the streets of Colombo saying India is showing aggression against Sri Lanka. It was quite unbelievable to see those kind of scenes. But again, one must understand the mindset of the majority Sinhalese community. Given the historical ties over thousands of years, they see in some form or shape, there's a lot of invasion, thousands of years, Cholas came and Pandyas came and all the other stuff they still keep talking about. And they fail to understand the world has moved on and Sri Lanka is a sovereign state and India is a sovereign state, and the current world order does not allow that. But they kind of use it as a mechanism to educate the children. And this particular thought process is embedded in the curriculum from grade 1. And that's quite important to understand the dynamic. So what we as an organization, me personally, whenever I'm engaging with whoever I can, I've been saying that any further help India gives to Sri Lanka, first thing they should address is change that curriculum. Not a single further dollar should go to Sri Lanka without changing that curriculum, which portrays India as a foe rather than a friend. So I think that's quite important to understand in that context. Other one or two things I thought might be useful to raise in this forum is, so if you look at north and east of Sri Lanka, 80, 70 years back, north is still predominantly Tamil Hindu. Eastern province, if you take Trincomalee province, which is one of the provinces in the east, it's almost 50% or 60% Sinhalese now. It was 100% Tamil Hindus 70 years back. If you take Batticaloa and Ampara districts, where there's a large amount of Muslim population and Sinhalese population through colonization over the last 6-7 decades, and Tamil population reduced to almost less than 50% combined to those two populations, those two provinces, I mean. So the rise of Muslim population in Sri Lanka is a concern, and in northwest Sri Lanka and eastern Sri Lanka, that is a concern that a lot of people are raised in recent years. I have even heard concerns in very local communities where Muslim community hotspots, where there are attempts to make or sort of make Friday as a public holiday, like in the Gulf countries, so that it becomes a Wahhabi type of administration in that local city or village, which is quite unbelievable to hear. But those kind of efforts and threats are also currently in that particular island. So I think all that put together, it's quite important that, like many of the previous speakers said, that India kind of takes an active role, first probably get that Indo-Lanka Accord implemented, which is quite critical, I think beneficial for both countries. And then there's another avenue that India should probably play an active role, which is the Quad. So Quad, where India is partnering with US, Japan, and Australia. I think the expectation from the Western world is where India can take a lead and drive that agenda when it comes to the Indian Ocean region, which will also be mutually beneficial for the region as well as for Sri Lanka-India relationships, and also will help China to be at bay. So there are a few things that we can definitely explore further and sort of bring back the think tanks together and see how this can be nurtured to the benefit of both countries and communities. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for giving some insight what needs to be done to strengthen the relation with Sri Lanka and India. That is most important, because past is past. We can learn lesson from there, but repeating more is not leading towards anything. We have to see that in present scenario and change situation, what India can learn from the past, and see that how we can dwell upon, especially when the China factor is coming and we don't have so much resources, how we can develop and how we can dwell upon the deep relationship, not only ethnic, but cultural, the way Professor Sanjay Bharwaj mentioned, culture in the name of culture, how we can strengthen our relation from people to people contact. And to see that definitely those countries have also become smart, but we have to see that how we can also become smart to balance China in the term of having people to people contact. Thank you very much for giving us some futuristic proposals. Now I can open the floor for question and answer. Yes, sir.
Yes, please.
You can mention whom you want the question should be addressed. Thank you.
No, with your permission, I have been involved with Sri Lanka for last 40 years. I'm the only person who Indo-Sri Lanka Friendship Association I started. I was the president, Cultural Council. And I also represent, I represent 12 international airlines, but one of the airline is Sri Lankan airline, which was Air Ceylon, Air Lanka and all. So I understand their psyche and understand that. I think this is a great opportunity for India because I think Prime Minister Modi has played his cards very well because China had really not only Sri Lanka, but also Pakistan and also Nepal. You see, but now in Pakistan and Sri Lanka, at least the educated people have realized the game of China because they put you in a debt trap. And their strategy also in Africa, because I represent Ethiopian Airlines also. So in Africa also their strategy is जो condemned prisoners होते हैं, the prisoners who are condemned, instead of keeping them on, spending on them, they send them on road projects and this, and they tell them to live there and set up their colonies, which become cells, of Chinese cells like a mini Chinese town. So we have seen a diplomatic angle, we've seen the academic angle, we've seen, very, very well put in our Tamil Sri Lankan origin, Tamil friend who's sitting in the UK. Now I'm giving you a commercial angle. I think to influence one or two newspapers of Sri Lanka is not difficult. Our IB or our intelligence sources or whatever strategy Modi ji uses, we can control one or two Sri Lankan papers, which controls the public opinion. Secondly, as far as tourism is concerned, we are number one right now. Indians are number one tourists. So we can, when there was an economic crisis in Dubai and people had left their cars, and it was the Indian tourist, according to the Dubai Department of Commerce, which brought back the economy of Dubai, UAE I'm talking about. So for Sri Lankan economy, I've been telling them that it is the Indian tourists who will put it on the right track, and rightly mentioned the Ramayana Trail. The people where, the temples need to be renovated, I agree fully. But already a lot of pilgrims and, Ramayana Trail is going. And already we have also sent a few groups of Indians going on those trails. Now, I had suggested 2-3 things, and I think you are influential enough to get them implemented. One was, I think, which the government is considering, that rather than going through the dollar and the pound, we should have a direct exchange between Indian rupee and Sri Lankan rupee. Because that way we will have a lot of Indian rupee there, and that will keep India's influence there. After the crisis, I've been twice after the crisis. I've been during the crisis also. The Indian rupee was equivalent to about 220 Sri Lankan rupees. And during the crisis, it was 440 Sri Lankan rupees, 100 Indian rupee. Now I think it's about 350 or something like that. So Indian rupee is a strong rupee. And just like America is ruling the world because of its dollar, I think this is a good opportunity for India to make the rupee acceptable in Sri Lanka as like it's in Nepal. So that will help us. That is one thing. And secondly, SARC is something, because we've replaced it by BeamStack. I'm addressing the BeamStack meeting, which is taking place in Calcutta as president of the Indian Chamber of Commerce, Aviation and Tourism Committee in Calcutta on the 14th of this month. But we have somehow ignored SARC. Now, except Pakistan, all the other countries in SARC are ready to listen to India. And we had started in the SAARC Chamber of Commerce, we had started an airfare. If you visit 3 countries of SAARC, that is not just India, Sri Lanka, but if you include it with Maldives, or if you include it with, Myanmar or Bangladesh, 3 countries, then all the SAARC countries had agreed for a 30% discount in the air travel. Now, that is something which needs to be reactivated. So we should not only try to make Indian rupee a legal tender, because today India is the fastest growing economy in the world. So we should also try to make the Indian rupee a legal tender in Bangladesh. Pakistan we can ignore because that's something which is, it is beyond redemption, beyond redemption. But if we talk about Nepal, Bhutan is already with us. Nepal, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and Maldives. So India, this is the right time to expose China that China's game is debt trap. Even they have been doing that in Africa. Yes, they can spend a lot of more money, but Indian teachers in Africa are respected today because they have, but the Chinese are not respected. So this is the right time for India to actually strike back. And I think the strategy which Modi ji is following is an excellent strategy, but it needs to be supported by all the intellectuals like you and other people in the government and all. And I think in the next meeting, you should get some diplomats from the Sri Lanka High Commission, and you should get some people from our external affairs. Otherwise, we are only preaching to the converted. You see, so that's my take. So I just would like to be excused because I have another commitment at 5:30.
Thank you very much. No,
So I
in
said
fact, this is a preparatory.
I have a vested interest in Sri Lanka and the entire SAARC region,
Yes.
and it's a commercial interest,
Mm.
and that is why I really feel that I won't say to control, but it is in the mutual interest of both the countries to work together. And I think through the Sri Lankan media, through the TV, Sinhalese TV, and the newspapers, we can influence the people of Sri Lanka. And the literacy is very high there in Sri Lanka. And to influence them is not difficult. The only thing is, and the Chinese can't do it, right? So the only thing, the Tamil diaspora is already with us. The Sinhalese originated from Orissa. Their history is there. And I have had the fortune of accompanying, Premadasa and some of these presidents and prime ministers when they came to, Bodh Gaya and did this whole thing. And we do handle a lot of Buddhist pilgrims which come to India. So, Buddhism itself is a healing factor. And we should also try to influence some of the Buddhist monks who are there in the Buddhist shrines. And since there's no one from Sri Lankan diplomacy, I think we should use our influence and ensure that our IB and our RAW is able to influence the monks, and the monks control the Singhali movement. So I think it's very easy for us to control Sri Lanka. And am I right, sir?
No,
Oh.
it's not easy.
It's not easy.
That's not the way to be.
That's
Open for discussion.
but I'm ready to be corrected. Yeah, I'll leave my card. I'm a life member of the Baleshwar ji ने मुझे member बनाया हुआ है. तो मैं तो one of the founder member हूँ, but I don't come so often. Sri Lanka, so I said I must make it.
All right. Okay. Bolo.
But very useful discussion, sir.
Thank you. Sure. Please go ahead.
So I have slightly differing opinion from what sir just said. I think when Professor Bardwaj was giving his lecture, he mentioned one line, and I think that is very important line, that there is a transition from civilizational entity to sovereign entities, and I think India has not been able to understand that sentence. It's not about Sri Lanka only. Take any of our neighbors. Recently, we had problem with Nepal when new constitution was framed with regard to Madhesis. And Tamils are there in Sri Lanka, Bangladesh. I can talk about every other country. So the thing is that, and it's hard to accept, but that's the reality, that all of these countries are sovereign entities now. And sovereign entities, the most defining feature is sovereignty. I mean, everyone will be very touchy about its sovereignty when you are talking about asking your own, and I don't think we have that kind of capabilities as well.
Yeah,
So-
you're right. We don't want to
Yeah.
explain. That is not the approach.
That's what, yeah, that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Anybody who has joined online would wish to make comment?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. I'm Amit Gupta.
Amit, boliye.
Thank you very much, sir. Considering the limitation of time, I would like to compliment all the speakers, the panelists, and the august audience here. Just one angle I would like to, see, I'm a member of FICCI as well, and FICCI has been working on blue ocean economy. Dr. Markandeya Rai is here, and he's an expert on blue ocean economy. While we consider our relationship with Sri Lanka and the coastal countries, so they are an integral part of Indo-Pacific, as well as blue ocean economy is something that touches the life of every Sri Lankan or the people living on the coastal areas. So that could be another dimension that the seasoned panelists can consider. I'm done. Thank you, sir. Because as Sir Ambassador Gupta sir has always been mentioning, that without commerce, without trade, the relationship cannot sustain. So I'm done. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Can I just take one more minute, sir, just
please,
to make a
please.
comment? So I probably mentioned that when I was initially speaking. So I think tourism, many of the speakers touched upon tourism, is absolutely critical. Until COVID, the largest number of tourists were coming to Sri Lanka from Ukraine and Russia. And I think I'm locally working in Chennai for some years now on a project, and the huge demand from Tamil Nadu and obviously from all the other states from India, which can be a lot of promotion that can be done with the Ramayana stories and a lot of Hindu temples, which speakers mentioned before. Huge opportunity there for tourism. And I think, if I'm not wrong, the Indian currency is acceptable as a tender in Sri Lanka now. I saw some news on that few months back, but I'm not too sure how realistically it's happening. But we need to check that, and if that is already in place, then it's a huge opportunity for tourism in India. And I also saw in the news literally last week that a cruise company started cruise trips to Sri Lanka from Chennai, going to 3 or 4 ports in Sri Lanka. So I think there's a huge opportunity for tourists, and that will obviously get that cultural and historical connect going. Second, I think industries and investment in Sri Lanka, foreign direct investment from Indian industries in Sri Lanka. Like many speakers mentioned, the literacy level is quite high. A lot of the call centers, back office operations, those type of things, which were in some areas, some cities like Mumbai, Delhi, Chennai, even India is becoming a little expensive for some of the Western companies. So Sri Lanka could be the next step to sort of not to lose that market, but invest in Sri Lanka and expand their operation to Sri Lanka quite easily can be done. And since the literacy levels are high, it's not a very difficult task to achieve. Then obviously, once you do industry-wise investments in Sri Lanka and create the job opportunities, form the commercial industrial relationships, once you are a larger investor in Sri Lanka, it's quite natural to, in some form of influence Sri Lanka's economy, and then sort of take that to the next step where it can mutually work between the two countries in a more beneficial manner. So I think those are a few areas that we should really look at. And like one of the speakers mentioned, Tamil diaspora is already quite signed up to this process, and there's a lot of capacity and capability Tamil diaspora can bring in for this whole process. So I think we should explore on those avenues going forward.
No, thank you very much. I'd like to ask Professor George Cook, since you were the first speaker, And if you're still online, would you like to add anything? Professor Cook.
Thank you very much um, for giving me an opportunity to speak once again. But there were lots of things that were expressed, and I guess some of the speakers didn't realize that there was a Sri Lankan on board, although that gentleman is from the India-Sri Lanka Foundation. It's extremely unfortunate that he takes a very different stance in terms of promoting India-Sri Lanka relations. He doesn't seem to be seeing that as an opportunity. He seems to be looking at it from a very different perspective, and that's fine. Everybody is open to their own opinion. We are both democracies. It's just unfortunate that he sits on a panel or a foundation in which it's all about promoting relations. It's very unfortunate, or has been sitting on that foundation. But that aside, it's important for us to understand the ground reality. There is no effort to declare Friday a holiday in Sri Lanka. There is no protest taking place against India in Sri Lanka. That is completely not happening. Sri Lankans are well aware of history, as Indians are too. It is important when we talk, as I mentioned at the very beginning, we have to learn from history. We've got to not repeat those mistakes. But then if we are going to keep going and harping on certain aspects of history, we're going to have to open all aspects of history. And that would become extremely concerning at that particular stage. We know what happened in the early 1980s. We don't want to go back into that era, do we? Do we want to talk about what happened across the Pork Strait? We don't want to, but we are not forgetting the fact of what happened in July 83 in Sri Lanka. We certainly remember that. It was a terrible time. It was taken advantage of by Prime Minister Indira Gandhi on that occasion, where she went international with it. If we want to talk about those issues, let's talk about everything. We can't be subjective. Ambassador Manikam, my apologies for responding to a comment that you made, but I must. You talked about specific incidents where relations have soured. Relations have also soared. Relations, if we are going to open up the past, we will open up a lot. We will open up quite a bit there. So we've got to be very mindful when we look back at history, not to pick and choose parts of history. We've got to take the whole of history in that context then. But I guess the most important thing, and one of the reasons why I joined the discussion, is looking forward, going forward. Where are we taking this relationship forward? We've had loads of issues in the past. If you want to find common problems between the two countries, we can find plenty. That's not our task. At least that's not my task. We certainly have to look ahead. We have to look to the future. We are neighbors. We have had problems. It's a family. Can you name a single family in which there are no problems? In your own families, do you have zero problems? Not at all. We all have issues. We all have problems. We all have challenges. But we've got to overcome them and move ahead. That's the most important thing. That is where the future lies. If we are going to keep harping on issues that have come up, there are loads that we can harp on. But that is not what we should be exploring. We should be exploring increasing connectivity between the two countries, increasing tourism between the two countries, increasing opportunities, increasing investment, increasing the meeting of leadership between the two countries, not only in the political arena, but across the sectors. It's so very important for us to do that. We must never, ever forget the fact that we've got to now look to the future. The future will be bright, but it all depends on how we look at it. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Cook. I fully endorse and share your sense for the relationship going forward. We need to be progressive. You heard a certain comment. We all heard a certain comment. Unfortunately, and that is true, there are people in India who think like that. But I can assure you that that's a minority view. I think in large measure, what is important is that the majority of public and the present government sincerely believe that we need to live together in the spirit of understanding, uh, countries which are our neighbors have certain legitimate sensitivities. And these sensitivities essentially surround the issue of sovereignty. How sovereignty is perceived in India is different, and how sovereignty of that country is perceived in its own country. So I think we have to show sensitivity, and certainly uh, most people in India, our organization, Antarashtriya Sahayog Parishad, does not promote that view. We positively think that the way to move forward is to show greater accommodation on both sides. India needs to be more self-assured. Look at history and geography, look at our deep connectivity in terms of culture, and yet not act in a restrictive sense. As I mentioned earlier, we should not make any exposure to China or America or France or any other country a red rag. Yes, it is legitimate for us to think that when our security interests are impacted, if a neighboring country is giving refuge to terrorist elements from India, if a neighboring country is giving refuge to separatists from India, and working from there and launching attacks on India, yes, I think India will take a very negative view of it. If a certain neighboring country is giving refuge or giving sustenance to radical elements which remain antithetical to India, then it is a matter of concern for us. So I think if these security interests, if these overall interests, are taken care of, there is a lot that India must do. So I think this is spirit of accommodation and give and take is the way to move forward. I think all our panelists have shared this very positive thinking. We will prepare a small report on the workshop, share that with the MEA as well. And when we do our further interactions in both August and September, we will be involving Ministry of External Affairs as well as the Sri Lankan High Commission. Our idea is not to discuss this in a closed room without Sri Lankans are the equal partners, equal stakeholders in moving forward this relationship. This relationship between India and Sri Lanka cannot be moved forward only by Indians. Sri Lankans also have to come forward. When we talk about economic collaboration, the problem very often arises that India is pushing for a project. The Sri Lankan, or for that matter, Nepalese, or if unless they have the ownership of that project, things will not move forward. And you cannot push a project solely for the benefit of India. I'll give you, just closing it with a very brief anecdote. Many years ago, I was ambassador in Tanzania, and Deepak Fertilizer was doing a project, taking out their natural gas and converting it into fertilizer. A story had gone around that Deepak Fertilizer will produce fertilizer out of the natural gas. All that fertilizer would be bought back in India. Now, Tanzania is an agricultural country, and Tanzania was deficient in fertilizer. So there was a newspaper report, a very that this was like an economic imperialism. Indian farm was coming, utilizing the natural gas and taking out the entire thing back to India. And I had to give an explanation that, look, Deepak Fertilizer is coming. The project proposal is that that natural gas would be, which is there, was going to be used for making fertilizer. And the first charge on that fertilizer would be Tanzania's own. And not only that, if Tanzania could export that fertilizer to a neighboring country, that is the second charge. And if after that, if their local consumption, domestic consumption, whatever they could export to whatever countries, which was their sovereign space, if anything was left, then India was committed to 100% buyback, which means that India was only trying to add to the viability. India didn't have to go to Tanzania to buy the fertilizer. We could buy fertilizer from so many different countries. So it's a commercial proposition, and we were only sweetening the commercial proposition. So I think unless you create equal stake, mutual stake of both partners, you cannot move forward the relationship. With these few words, I'd like to thank our very distinguished participants. Over to you, Markandeji will propose a formal vote of thanks. Yeah.
Just one point. I think the two areas that had been identified, one by George, energy sector. I think the two countries can constructively involve to develop energy sector. And that is the areas, particularly the clean energy, green energy, that India is also being part of International Solar Alliance and that. And the second point that Ambassador Manikam has also pointed out about the tourism, particularly, that these are the two areas I think can help in economic developments of the two countries. I think these are the 2 points must include in the report. Actually, thank you very much.
Sir, if you allow, I'm sorry to interrupt at the last moment, but as an entrepreneur and a business leader, I have my interest in Sri Lanka as well. And since a lot of infrastructure is taking place, we are missing on the steel segment as well. The iron and steel segment has huge potential. And in my individual capacity, I import from Europe, I import from USA, and then to someone I supply to Sri Lanka, wherein they have huge potential. So if allowed, I mean, like to request Mr. George that whenever we meet again, please try to include some industries there, some serious business organizations in the discussion. I'm done. Thank you.
So now we are coming to the end of today's workshop, which is just a preparatory workshop for the future better engagement with Sri Lanka and India. And I thank all the speakers who spared their time and took pain to come here, especially Ambassador A. Manikam. Thank you very much, sir. Professor Sanjay Bhardwaj, two speakers who joined from Tamil Nadu and Sri Lanka. Really appreciate Professor George Kuke and Bhuvan Bhaguhan for their insight, input, and their suggestion how we should move forward in strengthening relation between India and Sri Lanka, and how we can bring it better, stronger relation, not only in terms of economic, not only in terms of culture, rather in the security, and to see that mutual interest is served. So with these few words, I will just would like to give some stall to honor two of the speakers here who are present, Chetan, and I will request Ambassador Brind Gupta ji just to honor these two speakers. Secondly, I really appreciate and thank to all the participants and those who are physically and online joined us, and really appreciate that they should keep on doing that one. Really appreciate. And last but not least, I thank all the members of the ARSP and Professor Ambassador Brind Gupta ji and the ARSP for giving us opportunity to organize this workshop. Thank you so much.
We are missing George here, our tea, and we could have.
We'll send virtually.
Oh, thank you. Sir, thank you very much, sir. George, this is for you also.
Yeah. You are welcome to India.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Meeting.